So configuration, scripting, and programming. What are the differences? If you're doing configuration, you're doing more of just setting up data for a script or program. It's going to be imported into that somehow. Now, you can configure, the easiest way to do any type of configuration with something is to probably use an editor that's been designed to create that configuration. But sometimes you'll work with a configuration that you don't have an editor for, or you just want to work outside the parameters of that. And so there you're going to just type it into a text file or whatever you end up doing. But the bottom line behind configuration is your finished product, what you're doing is just going to be something that a script or program is going to look over to set up its data. So it's going to help tell that script or program that you're configuring what you want it to do. And this should be a very safe operation because everything should be checked by the script or the program. So you shouldn't have problems with serious safety issues. Now, what can you do with configuration? You're really limited to the code that you're configuring. What was it designed to do? You're not going to be able to tell it to become a whole nother program. Otherwise, you're doing more of running a script, and that's what we're going to get into next. So scripting is actually a code to be run in another program. Usually scripts are not compiled. Usually they're run in their text form and they're just interpreted on the fly. They can be run in an environment created by the program. A lot of times the program that is running that script, it imports the script, but it also creates objects and constraints on that script as well, which is what makes it a little bit safer than full programming. It can have some extra controls or leashes on what you're doing, but that's also a limitation to you and what you can create with scripting. So scripts are they aren't usually compiled. They aren't usually all that complex. They're usually much simpler to create. They don't usually run you don't generally define variable types as much. A lot of times you're not dealing with classes and encapsulation and a lot of complications. A lot of times it's just a file with some instructions that the program is going to run that script and run it in there. Throw those objects in with it and allow it to manipulate those objects and manipulate the program. An example of this would be like JavaScript for a web browser. It can manipulate the page, it can manipulate the browser itself, but it's not going to really become its own full program. It's really limited by the browser. So it's safer than full programming, yes. They have limitations. They don't let it rewrite the hard drive or anything crazy like that. It's able to manipulate that page. It's able to manipulate the browser a little bit, change some color schemes, add and remove buttons, move stuff around here and there, let the buttons evade the mouse or whatever someone's going to do. Hopefully they do more productive stuff than that, but I've seen some crazy stuff out there. But that's kind of the concept of scripting, is it's a code that runs in a program. So there are further limits on that because of the environment can limit it. So other examples of this, which are kind of a hybrid mix, are your PHP, Perl, Python, Ruby, those types of scripting or programming languages. A lot of times we look at those as programming languages. I consider them more as scripting languages because you don't compile them. Not all of them do full encapsulation, but some of them do, and that's why they're kind of looked at because they have a lot of the power of a of a programming language in a lot of cases, but they are still run by the program that interprets that. They're run by the PHP executable, or the and Java's really an interesting one too on there. Java is one that I would consider more of a program language on that, even though, because it does compile, but it still is run by the virtual machine executable. The finished product is. But all of those, including Java, the PHP, the Perl, the Ruby, the Python, they can, especially PHP is known for because it's designed to be run on a web server more so. So they have a lot more constraints that you can actually configure and tell the PHP executable, don't let any scripts do this, don't let them in this folder do this. And so there's all extra limitations that can be created by that environment, and those the environment there is what throws in all those functions that they can throw, a lot of the base classes and all that. They're created by that environment. Now, with full programming, and technically scripting is, the concept of programming is just to give instructions, but in this context I'm really dealing with more full programming, which is code to be compiled for running directly by the operating system or the processor. And this has minimal safeties on there. The operating system and the processors can create some safeties in there, but it's really just limited by the operating system at that point. You have a lot of power to be able to do a lot of stuff with full programming. You're out from under all of the other things that those other environments are going to limit you on. It's just down to the operating system at that point. And then I'm going to throw in a bonus too, which is operating system programming. If you're actually really going to code your own operating system, now you're operating outside of an operating system. This is code to be compiled and run directly by the processor outside of the operating system. So now you've left the operating system limits as well, and you're therefore only limited to the hardware limitations of the machine. These are things that you can do when you do this. You have a lot. It's more difficult in some ways because you don't have the operating system's tools at that point. You're operating outside that operating system. You had to build all your own tools at that point. But you have even more freedom than what you'd have had. This normal constraints of the operating system are gone too, and now it's simply down to the hardware. So programming for an operating system is a little bit different than programming for an application or a driver or something else like that, but that's where that comes in. So that's different levels of those are all different levels of programming and scripting and configuration. I figured I'd mention those, and thank you for watching.